Thank you for staying with us. After Saturday's postponement, conversations about leadership and succession comes to the surface. Do we have the right people to take over from well-performing leaders? And what happens when these incumbents lose? Will they agree to hand over willingly? Well, we'll talk about this. Joining us is Peter Eigbedion. He is a public affairs analyst. He's better known as Ward Smith. It's good to have you in the studio.
Good evening. Nice to have you as well. Thanks for having me.
So now, when we're talking about political succession, at the end of the day, some people would ask the question, what does that necessarily mean? So in your opinion, as
okay, I mean, in layman's terms, political succession refers to how power or the organs of it are handed over from one segment that has executed its portion to the other segment. It's not always a smooth thing, but typically it happens from one party to the other. The same way in the last dispensation, we had a different political party running the government for 4 years, or about, let's say, for 16 years apparently. And then we have a new set of people in office now. So the succession between that government and this government is an example of political succession. You have some states in Nigeria where you've had a particular political party rule for much longer, like Lagos State, where one party has been in power since the advent of the Fourth Republic. But even at that, we saw, and it is rumored that the last governor and the outgoing governor had differences in leadership styles and affiliations and leanings, and then you saw a discontinuation of the previous governor's policies. So those are examples of how political succession happens.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because at the end of the day, one would say consistency helps to understand some of these political playouts. And you look at the average Nigerian would say, well, taking Lagos State, for example, we know that there's usually the two-term philosophy, and this time around we don't have the Lagos State governor having that much luck. So in defining, how then do we define the patterns of political succession? We look at the role of zoning and rotation and a whole lot more. It's taking a more complex turn. Would you agree?
I agree, but again, if you look at succession now, if you take it outside of the political theater, you realize that succession has always been a challenge with mankind. Let me take quick examples. I can go even to the Bible. Even Jesus had disciples with him, and then some of them were lobbying for who would have the highest position when he ascended to the kingdom, to his father's right hand. And you would see over time, even from just everyday existence, in a house, you'd have sibling rivalry. Somebody is trying to gain the parents' love in a better way to be able to receive the bequeathing of other properties and stuff. So these things happen. It's human nature. These conflicts will arise every time there's a prize in sight. People will jostle for it, and it just so happens that because the stakes are higher in politics, that people go all out to position themselves to be the recipients of either someone's legacy or decision to hand over power to someone else. Same way in Lagos State, for instance, we know that many people, in fact, the PDP candidate has been lampooning the APC candidate because he's believed to be a lackey or a puppet of a former governor of this state. So succession will affect everything we do. In a business, for instance, you have a chairman who's winding down from service, and then it happens that people within the organization, they have people they prefer to be in place. It happens in church as well too. You have people who've been general overseers for a long time, and then they have a particular person they want to succeed them, and people are opposed to that because they believe that they're equally stakeholders in the process. So I think it's not difficult to observe that this thing occurs across different strata of human existence. The fact that it's political now is our focus this evening. And I think in Nigeria, one of the factors that affects us, that puts us in a bad position, is that people don't subscribe to the higher values of integrity, honesty, patriotism, hard work being a good thing. So because people don't subscribe to those higher values, we see over time that we cannot get the best crop of people to step into the leadership arena. If you don't have someone who's selfless, if you don't have someone who believes patriotism is rewarding and the right thing to do, you will find that people who come into the political space and just to be successors to those who are leading now will come with the same set of values that don't respect the rule of law, that don't respect sanctity of human life. So those are the things that we should be trying to correct as a nation. how can we get people with the right values who will uphold those values and push those values? How can we have more of them participate in the political process? I think.
Okay, well, I hear that since 1960 we've been facing this issue of succession, transfer of power, and most times it's accompanied by tension. And some researchers have said for Nigeria, the reason is because a lot of these people, a smooth transition in a democratic dispensation in Nigeria is very, very far-fetched, because some of these leaders hate to follow the rules and the guidelines of a democratic process. They would rather want it to be done their way. But why are we in a democracy and we do not follow rules? Is it a Nigerian thing or is it a human thing?
It's a human thing, and I say that with...
But there are democracies in other places in the world and the people follow the process.
It's a human thing. Again, I'll lean towards saying it's a human thing because of this thing I'm going to mention now. If there is no incentive to do the right thing, nobody will do the right thing. If there is not a system or a punitive system that punishes or does not reward evil, then people will not be inclined to do it. Outside of these shores, we find that people who are inclined to do the wrong thing in political spaces get sanctioned for it. In some places, they're even executed for it, they're killed for it. Here, we don't have that big stick, as it were, that's going to be wielded if people fail to do the right thing. And because there's no incentive for doing the right thing or reward for doing the right thing, people as human nature, people will generally not do the right thing if there's nobody there to push them to do the right thing.
But we have laws in this country. We have codes, criminal, political. I mean, we have the Electoral Act. I mean, there's so many laws in this country.
The problem is enforcement.
Talking about the big stick here. Yes, we have laws, the punitive measures, but I think what you're trying to talk about is the willpower on the part of the people who are or the institutions that are supposed to somewhat enforce these laws.
I've heard the argument that we get the leadership we deserve, and I've seen in different climes, in Turkey, I've seen in France, for lesser issues, you've seen the people who the power really belongs to, the citizens of the country, they've stepped up and demanded for the right thing to be done. And we've seen leadership effected at the instance of the people. Here and it's an offshoot of the years of military rule, where people are afraid to step out to protest, and if they do protest, they're afraid they're going to lose their lives, they're afraid there's going to be reprisal attacks afterwards. So those are the things that prevent us from demanding for the right thing to be done. Otherwise, you've seen times when people wanted, I remember in this dispensation, people wanted to come out to protest something this government did, a policy, and then on the eve of that protest, or even on the day of the protest, we saw that people were disallowed from protesting. And one of the tenets of democracy is people are supposed to be allowed the right to protest. And we've seen over time that in this dispensation and that's one of the things that people are afraid of in terms of this succession planning for either political spaces, because people are afraid to come out and demand for the right thing because they know there is nobody to look out for them. There's no system in place. We have strong men and not strong institutions.
Now, we understand in Nigeria how religious and ethnic credentials play in determining who becomes the next leader and a whole lot more. Now, that has always been the bane of discussions and crosses over even those with stronger qualifications at the end of the day. But do you think necessarily we can wean ourselves as a people and as a country away from these factors that have dug their fingers so deeply that we lose sight of really what should be our objective and define our level of perspective when it comes to choosing leaders? Then we can't do any strong assessment at the end of the day if we don't have the leaders put in place that should do the needful.
I believe it's possible, but this country has been fractured, balkanized. I mean, dealt fatal blows in different places that cut across religious views, ethnic views. So it's going to take time for those wounds to heal. Let's
even take a look at even our appointments now by even the president, because that has also come under sharp criticism.
Exactly.
In the last 4 years, how do you think that has played out?
I mean, even a blind person, if you read out the names, if you put a sheet of paper on braille, and then you had someone read out the names of people who've been appointed into sensitive positions across the country, and they tend to lean towards one part of the country, and there's a statement credited to the current president that he would favor a certain people who voted for him more than those who didn't vote for him in the last elections, it creates the sentiment that this is not the time or place to believe in the values that can push for these things to be done away with. For instance, in the USA, affirmative action that allowed for people of color to be able to go to education institutions, it was in place for quite a long time, and it enabled black people and minorities to be able to access education and other things as well. But we see now that that affirmative action principle is no longer the operative principle. Now it's more merit. And in Nigeria, it's going to take some time. There have been wounds. You find statements being made, over time that hit the polity up across ethnic lines, across religious lines, and people.
Or do you remember, or do you still recall that just while we're having the whole campaigns and a whole lot more, these same lines I say we've been hit are what is being exploited or explored on? Because at the end of the day, the politicians are saying that, well, vote for Party A or Party B, and come 2023, you are going to have a secured seat.
Well, politics will always appeal to different sentiments. People who are aspiring for anything will appeal to the sentiments of the people they're trying to get whatever they want from. So if they will say that, they will flatter you. I've seen men try to woo women and they say all sorts of things, all sorts of nice things, and then when they get what they want, they are gone with the wind.
But we have this whole zoning thing in political parties, whether it be Party A or Party B. That again goes to buttress the fact that we in this country see things through the prism of religion, ethnicity, and of course, those kind of things. So really, and the parties take advantage of it because this is who we are. Maybe if we were not these kind of people, it would have been easier to do away with it.
It would have been easier, but we're stuck with who we are now. Nigeria is an agglomeration of different ethnic groups, and a lot of the minorities have been oppressed for years. The only hope for many of them to receive some redress is for somebody who they believe is like them to be empowered, which is why, to a large extent, in the Jonathan era, a lot of people were sympathetic towards him, especially minorities, because they believed he was one of them. And then to a lot of people as well, from minority groups, his eviction from office, as they say, brought a sense of mourning for months in different parts of the country, because it was assumed, in fact, it's not just an assumption, many people still believe that he was kicked out of power because he was a minority. Again, some of the sentiments that were spewed after he lost, or after he considered victory, were reinforcing that same view as well too. So I think it's going to be a matter of time. It's going to take time for these wounds to heal. We need a leader, and not just a leader. We need people who will come out and present a balm for the wounds of our nation. It might not happen.
But do you think necessarily we are objective enough to do such assessment? Because at the end of the day, we even look at the postponement of the election, which was supposed to have been held last week Saturday, and we're looking towards this Saturday now. Some have also said, well, it is because of the appointment of Amina Zakari by the president, knowing this religious and ethnic leanings once again raising its ugly head. They are saying because of that appointment and not doing the right thing by removing that officer is why we have that incompetency that has led to this current failure. What do you make of such a stance?
It's not without reason, but if you look across board, the incompetence has become a national calling card for many of us. It's in different sectors. We can't run away from it. So to highlight this failure by INEC, it's a bit unfair, but again, it's deserved. However, this thing we're looking at is deeper than just politics, because you have people in different organizations. In the civil service, people from a certain part of the country are viewed as untouchable, because for years they've been the mainstay in terms of power being rotated in the civil service. So you have people from different regions who want to aspire for different positions, but again you find that people from a certain region are given preference over them.
So where's the place of merit? Where's the place of being able to do the job over, oh well, is my brother or is from a certain place, let's just allow him, it's their turn? Because I'm thinking, if I want a guy who can, let's say, make the best tables, I'm not going to ask where's he from. I want to know what kind of tables has he done.
What's the antecedent? Let's see what
I want to see merit. I want to see professionalism over where you're from. That should not be the first thing that we consider.
You might know because you've been raised to have a higher value system than many people. I know someone...
We have the NOA, we have all of these people.
They're not doing the job as well as they should.
People, whether you're low down there or what... Our value systems need to be upgraded somewhat.
Yes, so let me give this example. I know somebody who was trying to get a property in the city of Lagos, and then the owner of the property, the landlord, said to this prospective tenant that, I didn't know you're from this part of the country. I don't give my property to people from this part of the country. I don't really blame that landlord for saying that, because the values he's been exposed to over time allow for that to happen. We've been exposed to a large extent to better, to more. So our thirst, our zest for more is there. We've been trained to aspire for better. Many of the people we're dealing with, especially on the grassroots level, have not been exposed to that illumination. So, for instance, you have people who will do the right thing because they've been taken to a bush to go and swear an oath to a deity. So the affiliation and their service delivery
will remain unshaken.
Will remain unshaken because of that subscription. However, we who have been wired to do the right thing because of our beliefs in integrity, in the value of honor, in the value of hard work, there is not much of a reinforcement behind the scenes to make us stick to those values. Because, I mean, even coming here sometimes, or going around the country, sometimes you encounter, look what happened with the guy who was shot allegedly by a customs officer over the weekend. If the guys were doing their job properly, that wouldn't have happened. I've experienced things like that. But again, if you blame the guy who's taking bribe or demanding for a bribe, when that's all he's known to do, because that's what everybody else does around him, you're not being fair to him because he's been educated to do that.
So how do we, because how do we go past this? Because we keep making reference to it. In fact, the issue of politicians, again, let me just go back to that. There's a belief that these politicians don't even believe in the ethos of democracy. There's no such thing like democracy. I remember under the Jonathan administration, Donyo Kupe, I cannot forget, said that, yes, there is democracy, but we have a Nigerian way of doing things. And I'm trying to understand this Nigerian way of doing things, for how long? Has it even worked for us? Has it changed anything? If it's not changing anything, why are we sticking to that Nigerian way of doing things? Why don't we try to change it? And it starts from our homes, changing the way we think. Because we went to unity schools, you know, and the idea of unity schools was so that you could cross paths with people that were not from your same parts of, you know, the world. How come this has not changed our mentality? And every day we keep talking about it, but it doesn't seem to sink in.
I'll use an example I heard. There's this parable from part of Nigeria that I've been to, and they say one person can cook food for the village, and the village will eat it. But then, if the whole village cooks food for one person, the person won't be able to eat it. So there's not enough people populating the ranks of those who will push these values out there. You have a few of them, only just a few of them. So because they are limited in number, the larger masses, the larger amount of people will beat them down, will eat them up, will overshadow whatever news of good or aspiration for better values that exist. So we need people like you and I in these spaces to talk more, to inspire leadership, to be beacons of light, as it were, because we don't have enough of that. I mean, there's a candidate running for the office of president right now amongst the candidates running for president, and he's been known for being a motivational speaker. And you find some of the jokes online saying, "Who will aspire to perspire? Help." And these are the people who for years have been working even better than the NOA to inculcate the right values in our system. But there's so much that a loner like him, a lone ranger like him can do. If we had 20 more people, 50 more people, 1,000 more people. I was talking to someone one day and he said to me, how many are we in Nigeria? I estimated it almost 200 million. And he said, are you telling me that 10% of Nigerians have integrity? And I looked at the numbers. If we're 200 million and have 20% of, or 10% of that, that's 20 million people. Can I say that 20 million people in this country really have integrity? I'm not sure I can say that. Can I say 1% of that has integrity? I can't say that. Can I say I have integrity? I've been in situations where
Peter, I would, yes, because I know there'll be some situations that with the right price, you would be surprised at yourself that you do certain things. Okay, so now, still looking at this conversation of political succession and understanding what this really means, at the end of the day, you alluded to the fact that sometimes we deserve the kind of democracy we receive, but do we also deserve this do or die mentality that we've seen defining how succession plays out in Nigeria?
No, we don't. And again, we saw what happened with the last elections, the last cycle of elections.
Because all of the political parties have said, yes, if we are defeated hands down, we are going to lay off our grip of power or that fight for power.
We saw in the last elections one of the frontline candidates insist that his ambition was not worth the blood of any Nigerian. And in the previous cycle, we had seen someone say that if the elections didn't go a certain way, that the blood of dogs and baboons would be spilled. And whether or not that was true, that was the general belief across board in 2011. And we saw the outcome of it with youth corpers getting killed in different parts of Nigeria after the elections that brought in President Jonathan. Now, in 2015, we saw a man insist that no matter what, nobody's blood should be spilled on his account. And that became the paradigm, as we were, leading up to these elections. However, because of the manner in which Jonathan was kicked out of office, hate speech and fake news became weaponized. It was a tool in the hands of different people in the last election cycle. And we still find that you've created clusters of people who are wailers or hailers, and this animosity is resident in our polity, whether we like it or not. Until we deal with that, I doubt that this current election cycle will be able to benefit from the goodwill that President Jonathan brought to the
There's also a belief that Nigerian politicians like to hang on to power. But then I see this also as an African situation. We can go as far as Zimbabwe. Look at Cameroon.
Theodore Mbasogo and
it's
their
in Asia
lives.
as well. It's in Asia. It's in different parts of the world.
But it's really dominant in Africa. It's so bad that, you know, we see different parts of the world and world powers asking for peaceful, you know, handovers. I mean, I was in Kenya 2 years ago when, you know, Kenyatta and Raila Odinga were having their own face-off, you know, and people were being killed, people were being lynched. Why do we have this situation in Africa? Why do we hang on to power? We've seen people do 4 years in other parts of the world and step aside and let other people come. And then they still find a way to come back to power. I've seen, I think, a former Brazilian president is trying to run again. And in, I think, Sierra Leone or Liberia, somebody's also trying to come back again. So why can't we leave and let leave in this part of the world?
Using the Kenyan example, because this cycle of violence you alluded to also happened in the penultimate cycle of elections as well over there. Let me situate it locally. A lot of the ethnic minorities, and even people in general, they tend to launch their hopes and aspirations on the space shuttle of someone else's ambition. So their meal tickets or their preservation is dependent on such a person being in power. Now that person also reinforces their belief system, and they become his subjects, and he becomes their god. So they do everything they can to make sure that person gets into office, because they believe that their sustenance, their livelihood, their survival is dependent on such a person's continued stay in power. Because of that, survival is a natural instinct of people. People will go all the way out to do whatever it takes to survive. When this becomes a norm in the political system, it's going to take a lot of work to eradicate it. So locally, you have people who believe that, so I was having a haircut 2 weeks ago, and somebody was saying, I'll vote for X candidate because he hasn't done anything to my tribe. He hasn't done anything wrong to my tribe. And I'm like, but really, are you going to vote on the basis of that when you're more exposed to knowledge than the average guys that they didn't expect to think this way? After spending a few minutes discussing with him, I noticed that his tone changed. And on his way out, he said, you know what, I'm going to have a rethink. And I think more of us who know this at our own level, we should be the ones championing these things, telling people, you know what, even if this man has promised you that he will do heaven and earth for you when he gets back in office, you've seen from experience that these people kick you to the curb, they won't treat you right, and you can't do anything to them to another election cycle. So we need to get people understanding. That's why I like the campaigns by by the civil society organizations, teaching people that, you know what, don't rely on politicians for your sustenance. They're just going to use you and dump you, as has been the norm over time.
And now, after this election, we'll be looking at another election cycle as well, and it's important that you know you are going to survive under the conditions you find yourself in. This bring the question of defection at the end of the day, because some political elites or actors will say, well, since I didn't have the ticket on this one, or they are not faring so well, they're usually quick to switch over. So we always have the situation of strange familiar fellows, and we are just picking from the same stock. How do you then think we are, at the end of the day, going to be able to have individuals who have a sense of direction and then lead the country aright? Because at the end of the day, we've been having succession upon succession, and it's almost the same thing we are seeing.
Eventually, I've heard that nature corrects itself, that it will course correct itself. So I remember coming up in the Jerry Rawlings years, and I would hear, oh, the Rawlings treatment is what's going to work in Nigeria. But whether I like it or not, the main actors over the last 2-3 decades are waning. They are coming to the end of their lives. So there will be a passing of the buck, whether they like it or not. So if you look at this cycle of elections, you will see younger people like you and I have stepped into the space. You see a Bankole Wellington. You see,
but their powers still remain, and that's why they still have that role of godfathers.
Influence.
Yes.
And it is deep.
Yes, but you know, if you don't have enough people engaged in the fight, you're never going to win. So we need to champion or herald the news that we need more people with the right value systems coming out. So it's not just a Bankole Wellington who became the butt of the jokes on Twitter for having the audacity to step out and do what no one else is doing, or very few people are doing. You have a Fed that may fail. You have more people trying to get in the system this time. Unfortunately, the current status quo doesn't favor the lesser political parties. But over time, if you have more and more,
that's why my question still remains that what sort of pattern do you see taking place with defections? Because even prior to this election, a few hours, a few days, we've seen behind closed doors meeting, and people just quickly run to the big parties. That's the two main parties. And
it's merge.
So that sense of ideology, they were all screaming, we know what we are doing, we have strong individuals, we would bring strong institutions to play, and then you now run to who you fault.
The Battle of Troy. For weeks, for months, they besieged Troy. They couldn't get in. Eventually, they presented a Greek Trojan horse. You know the story. So, anybody who runs or defects to a different party in the hope that if I'm here early enough, by the next cycle, I would have been an insider and I can change things from the inside, it's not out of place. Those aspirations are legitimate. But the thing is, over time, like I'm saying, until we have more and more of the right people, if the Trojan horse had just 2 soldiers, it would have had no effect. But there was a detachment of soldiers, of trained men, determined men who knew, now that we've gotten in, we will do what we couldn't do from the outside. And we'll do it on the inside. Until we have more people get into the system from different parties, if you want to, I mean, if I had my way, I would have been a card-carrying member of a party now. But due to certain things, I couldn't pitch my tent with anyone, given my other affiliations. I do believe that we need to get more people involved in the political systems. It won't take so much to start building a new political party from now.
We have 91 already. Oh my goodness. What do we want with new political parties?
I mean,
is it about the parties, or is it about people getting more involved in the parties that already we think have ideologies? Because all I'm hearing is, oh, let's just build new parties. Oh, let's, come up with new ideologies. There are parties that seem to have ideologies that each and every one of us can fit into. But then you're also saying, oh, well, let's wait. This cycle will wear itself up. Will we keep waiting for certain people to age and die off instead of taking the bull by the horn?
I use the Rawlings example to just say that over time, even though we didn't have to use that extreme, in time, nature presents us an opportunity, a time, a synchronicity between time and chance, for people to be able to walk in and correct the course. You have leaders like that. We have that now. There's what is called the demographic dividend.
But Rawlings too also went with the military rule kind of system and a whole lot more, and people have faulted his own sort of leadership as well.
I mean, not everything can be gotten on a platter of gold. It's going to take some hard work. It worked for them, given their circumstances. In today's world, I doubt that the military option, like he did, would work in Nigeria or indeed many countries, because there would be international pressure on such a person to vacate the scenes. However, this is the point I was trying to make with that analogy or illustration. Eventually, these old men that they've been shouting they should kill, I've heard many you say, just kill all of them. That won't work. Even if you kill them and you don't step up to the plate, the men that they've raised with the same values that they have will be the ones to populate the leadership spaces. If people like us don't get in those spaces. So we need more people to come out, and when they come out, when they step up to the plate to bat, in time, you know, for instance, the candidate of the PDP in the presidential elections has offered 40% of his government or cabinet slots to youth. I'm imagining
that remains to be seen.
That remains to be seen. So with that offer, you won't really blame people who migrate to his platform, believing that if he gets into office, they too can be given opportunities to serve and correct the course of this country's decadence.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed, because a lot will be happening between now and Saturday. The weekend. But we want to thank you very much, Peter Eigbedion. He is a security consultant. He's also known better as Wordsmith. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Remember to follow all of our conversations at Plus TV Africa. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And please also comment on YouTube. We are live on YouTube, so watch our conversation as well.
All right, we'll be back after this break.